Welcome to Numina, the only place that's reverse engineered the College Board. We're going to show you how to solve these problems very quickly, with mathematical precision, and with 100% confidence. That means you no longer have to rely on the answer key, but purely on the power of your knowledge. The mind is a powerful tool, and we're going to show you how to use it. Here's how it's done.
Question 29. Despite its cultural importance, the Daily Gazette lost 70% of its subscribers since 1920, and by 1955 was losing as much as $200,000 a year. In A, we have despite. Here we'll check for modifier errors, specifically whether or not the preposition despite is appropriate. We've boxed out despite its cultural importance. Why? Well, here we're saying that the Daily Gazette had an importance, its cultural importance. However, despite functions letting you know that even though it had importance, something negative happened. The opposite happened. Did you want to add anything there, Anthony Sosane?
I think that was a great explanation. So whenever we see despite the preposition, it means the opposite of what should be expected or what we anticipate is happening.
Great.
So A is fine.
Great. So let's move on to B. In B we have lost. Here we'll check for verb tense errors. Well, I see that lost is simple past, and as we know from previous problems, when we're testing for verb tense, we should scan the sentence for clues to help us identify the proper tense. Anthony Solson, do you see any clues here?
I do. I think we see several clues. We can look at since 1920 and by 1955. These two prepositional phrases should tell us whether or not the tenses are being used correctly.
Great. So let's take a closer look at those clues. Here, since 1920. Why is that important? Well, here it's letting us know from this moment, from 1920 onward. Again, we're not exactly sure if there's a stopping point, so we have to look at other parts of the sentence maybe to find out if there's an end to this action of losing subscribers. Would that be fair to say, Anthony Sonsini?
It certainly would. We should also look to see whether or not this was an action that continued throughout a span of time, or whether it happened at one point in the past and ended at one point in the past. In this case, it seems like it happened through a time span, or during a time span.
Okay, so we know that at the very least, our simple past lost is incorrect here. So lost, we do have an error here in B, and we just need to see and think about how we can correct this error. Most likely we're looking at one of our perfect tenses, our past perfect tense. If you can see by our note at the top, to form the past perfect tense, you'll need to use had plus or past participle. Anthony Silson, why would the past perfect tense be appropriate here?
Let's look at our verbs also. We have was, losing, and lost.
Okay.
One of the actions had to come before the other, it appears. And also, lost, again, seems to, this action seems to have started in 1920 and ended uh, in 1955. And so by 1955, it had already lost 70% of its subscribers. And in so doing, it was losing as much as $200,000 a year. So again, it seems like one action preceded the other, and again, this action happened over a span of time. So the past perfect seems to be the only tense that B could possibly take.
Great. In C, we have was losing. Here, we're going to test for subject verb, verb tense, and parallel errors. For subject verb, we'll need to identify again our subject and our verbs. Our subject is the Daily Gazette, which is singular, and we appropriately have the singular verb was losing. So there's no error with subject verb agreement. What about verb tense? Well, here was losing is written in the past progressive, and this is appropriate as we've already established from choice B in our explanation of time and of the time phrase. Was losing is okay because we know by 1955 we know that some action is occurring. The continued loss of, in this case, subscribers and money. So the past progressive was losing is okay here. But Anthony Swenson, what about parallel? What are we looking for parallel?
Well, I mean, in this case, the tenses work. They don't necessarily have to be identical tenses. So had lost and was losing would work. And again, because they don't, as long as they make logical sense, we're in good shape. So we don't necessarily have to worry about a parallel issue here. The and can tie the verb in B and C together.
Great. So just as another note for all of you out there listening, verb tenses and don't necessarily have to match exactly. We need to just check to make sure there are no logical fallacies and or inconsistencies, which there are none in this sentence. Both the past perfect tense that we want to change B to and the past progressive was losing here is okay. In D, as much as, we're going to check for idiom comparison errors. Here we have, again, the idiom as much as is okay. And it's an idiom that's offering a comparison. Was losing as much as $200,000 a year. Do you see any errors here, Anthony Swenson?
Not at all. As much as is function as an adverb describing the verb was losing or modifying that verb, and they're comparing the amount to $200,000 a year. So this D works just fine.
Great. That brings us back to B. Lost. We have a verb tense error here. The simple past tense verb lost is incorrect. We need to get rid of it and replace it with had lost. What do you think, Anthony Swenson?
That looks great. I think the tense clue that you should have looked out for was since 1920. Now, had this action continued until now, we would have used the present perfect tense. So, for example, if we get rid of everything after 1920, and the sentence were to read, despite its cultural importance, the Daily Gazette had lost 70% of its subscribers since 1920. Instead of had lost, has lost would have been better if we didn't have the second end of the sentence. But this action, it starts from 1920 and ends by 1955. So by 1955, something had already happened. And these two tense clues since 1920 and by 1955 uh, really forces B to be in the past perfect tense. So it's very important that you look out for prepositional phrases and words uh, or adverbs that functions as adverbs um, to give us an idea or a definite clue of what tense the verb should be in. So this was a tough one, but there are other problems like this, so be careful of these tense clues. Lumina, empowering minds.